We're delighted today to welcome you to It Happened in Grand Prairie as we tape our 225th segment of persons that are important to the history of Grand Prairie, that made history a long time ago or even just recently. And that's the case today. We have a wonderful young lady that has been very important to making history in Grand Prairie. And since she is leaving Grand Prairie, we thought this would be a proper salute to add her and all of the history making in her archives. And Belinda Espinosa, we want to welcome you to the set.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Belinda Espinosa, formerly the Deputy City Manager of Grand Prairie, Texas, Assistant City Manager, and all such titles. And now you're going to be changing roles. But before we get into that discussion, I'd like to establish your genealogy. You know where your camera is located. I'd like for you to look out and talk to everyone in video land. And let's get better acquainted with the Belinda Espinosa, the real person. Would you do that for us at this
Sure. Well, Ruthie, I was born in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
And when I was about 2 years old, my parents loaded up the family and moved off to Los Angeles, California.
Yes.
And that's basically where I was raised for about 21 years. And I went to undergraduate school at California State University at Sonoma and began studying political science, thinking that I really wanted to be an attorney.
I see.
And when I got into some of the political science courses, they really started focusing in on public administration. And I had one crazy professor who used to get up there and rant and rave and bring all kinds of newspaper articles about what the federal government and the county government and the local government was doing, and he would criticize them and laugh about the bureaucracy and that kind of stuff. And I became very interested in local government. And I had originally thought that I would go on to graduate school and that I would probably work for the federal government or the state government. And so when it came time to do graduate school, I decided to come back to San Antonio because my parents had relocated for retirement. And I applied to St. Mary's University and got accepted and became part of the master's program in their public administration program. So within probably the first 2 months, I was selected as a special intern at St. Mary's University and was hired in a position for the city of San Antonio in the budget office. And after a couple of months, I mean, it was just probably 2 months, then I got hired full-time as a budget management analyst. And so I guess I've had really two major mentors in terms of getting my career really started. One of them was my professor, Charlie Cottrell, at St. Mary's University, who was very involved in elections and in local government and got me interested in it. And then when I worked at the budget department in San Antonio, my supervisor, Rick Naylor, who now is basically the finance director for the San Antonio International Airport, really got me charged up. And I was real excited, and I decided that that was where I belonged, was in public sector. And I loved all the issues that were being discussed and the ability to really make things happen and make a difference. And so I stuck with that. And then the rest is history, so to speak. I stayed in San Antonio for 5 years and then came to Grand Prairie in August of 1985 as assistant to the city manager.
All right, we're going to stop right here in Grand Prairie, Texas.
Okay.
We're going to go back to Belinda. I'd like for you to name your parents, and if you had brothers or sisters, I'd like to get that in the history record before we go into our Grand Prairie tenure, with your permission.
Sure. Well, my father's name was Robert Espinosa, and he basically was self-employed and was in the sheet metal fabrication for restaurants. He made restaurant hoods and air conditioning,
Yes.
heating and ventilating systems. My mother was Elba Espinosa, and she was a registered nurse and worked pretty much throughout her life with premature babies in intensive care units. And then I have two older sisters. My first sister, her name is Yvette, and she lives in Los Angeles now, and she is a playwright. and a professor at UCLA, and has done very well. She's got a lot of things that have been published and actually been in production. She's had some things on TV. And then my next sister, Christina, she lives in Washington, D.C., and she's an attorney with the General Services Administration. And she handles a lot of workman's comp and litigation for the federal government, for the employees. And then I have a younger brother, Michael, who is still in San Antonio, and he has basically taken over the business from my father.
I see.
Both my parents have been deceased. My father died in 1985, about a month after I came to Grand Prairie, which was really hard because I was going through a lot of changes, you know, relocating and a new job. And then my mother died in 1989. Again, I was here in Grand Prairie, and there was a lot of changes going on then, too.
Yes. All right, now, let's get to Belinda. Growing up, your elementary schools, I'd like for you to name the schools you attended, and possibly some of the mentors in your younger life that got you on the right track to be able to go advance and to go to California State and then come back to St. Mary's. Were there special people, and especially if you had grandparents? I'd like for you to name drop some of the people that were important to you.
Okay. Well, since we lived in California, I didn't really grow up with grandparents and extended family because they were still here in Texas. But in terms of schools, they're asking me to go way back. I remember my elementary school was Tonopah was the name of it, and that is an Indian name. And it was a brand new school, and I remember that it was very unique then because it was circular.
I see.
It was, and so the rooms were in circles, and there were different, you know, circles around the campus. And it was one of the first schools to have air conditioning, which was rather interesting. I remember that. And in terms of elementary school, I can't say that any one teacher. There's a few that stand out that I really liked, and I guess those were ones that I felt really believed in me and encouraged me and gave me confidence. My first grade teacher, I remember Mrs. Stoddard. I don't know why I remember her, but I liked her a lot. I remember that.
Yes.
And in third grade, I remember Miss Hahn, because that's when you started to learn how to write a cursive.
Yes.
And I remember that I used to write very small. And every day my father would make me come home from school and practice handwriting. And because his thing was, you know, you have to print and write legibly so that people know who you are, so they can read your name. And I didn't like it at the time because I would have to practice over and over. But now I get a lot of compliments on my handwriting, and you always know you can read my name when I sign it.
Where's high school?
High school, I went to Bassett High School, which...
what town?
In La Puente, California.
All right.
And my friends here in Texas give me a lot of grief over that because I don't pronounce it in the Spanish way, which is La Puente. And that's because nobody called it that when I was growing up. They just called it La Puente. And that was an interesting experience. I took all the college preparatory classes, chemistry and geometry and English for writing and all of that, and had a really good time in high school. But my high school, not a whole lot of people from my class got to go to college. They just either didn't want to go or didn't have the opportunity. And I was one of the lucky ones because there was a scholarship program, and I got a full 100% paid scholarship to the University of California at Santa Barbara. Room and board, books, tuition, and everything. So that was really exciting, and it was the first time I was going to be away from home, so that was scary. And but I went ahead and went to school and started studying political science, thinking I was going to be an attorney. And my second year, my older sister had gotten a divorce. She had 2 children, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and was about to start her second year of law school. So I decided that I would move up there to the Bay Area and help her with her kids so she could finish law school, and I transferred schools to Sonoma State University.
That is wonderful.
So that was a big learning experience.
Yes, it was, and it was another big move, wasn't it?
Another big move, right.
All right. I think that that gives us a real good basis for your coming to Grand Prairie. Now let's talk about Grand Prairie, Texas.
Okay.
And who invited you to come? How did you find out about Grand Prairie, Texas? We're not real big on the map in 254 counties of Texas even. What brought you this direction?
Well, I first heard about it through a job announcement, which is published by the International City and County Management Association. And another person that I know, David Eisenlohr, used to be the assistant to the city manager or assistant city manager, I can't remember. Anyway, David and I worked together right out of graduate school in San Antonio, so I knew David.
Yes.
And so I wanted to move on because I had done 5 years there and it was time to make the next step.
In your budget career? In
my budget career, right. And I always wanted, you know, to be the city manager. I want to be a city manager, so I was on that track. So the next logical step would be assistant to the city manager. So I applied for the position and got selected and was shortlisted. And Bob Blodgett was the city manager at that time.
Yes.
And Bob Blodgett and I travel in somewhat of the same circles because his father was very involved in the LBJ School of Public Affairs.
Yes.
And we knew some of the same people, and one of those people was my boss, Marcus Johns, in San Antonio. And so Bob, you know, looked into my work history and my resume, and I got chosen, and I came and interviewed, and one of the things that Bob was really looking for was someone to do the first capital improvement budget for Grand Prairie, because they didn't have one.
Yes.
And what was happening was they were just doing bond sales, and they were considering that, you know, their budget. Well, I did the first comprehensive capital improvement budget for San Antonio, which was about $330 million with all the sources. Big budget.
Big budget.
So I think that kind of won me over against all the rest of the candidates.
Yes.
And so I got selected, and it was through a panel interview. And in fact, Anna Dahl, who is now deputy city manager here in Grand Prairie, was a budget person in Grand Prairie and was on that panel. So it's kind of fun because we've come full circle. Anyway, so I was selected, and I moved up to Grand Prairie as assistant to the city manager with that charge initially, was to develop the first capital budget for the city.
And were you hired as an assistant to the city manager at that time?
Yes.
So you had the title and everything that goes with it.
Right.
All right. And in all of this budget preparation, or the capital budget preparation, did you make special friends along the way? Did you have a team?
Yes.
Would you like to name drop?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
There are some really special people that work for the city of Grand Prairie. There's some employees that have been there for many, many, many years and really have a lot of loyalty and a lot of depth and feeling for the organization. One of them is Liz Cherry, who works in accounting, and Liz has worked for the city like 26 years.
Wonderful.
And from day one, Liz always was very helpful and would answer questions and direct me and just in a very friendly way and a wonderful, warm way. And she always knew the answers, or she'd, you know, help me find it. And so Liz is one of them. And of course, in doing the capital budget, I had to be in accounting to try to find out where we had been before I could say where we were going. And also Ken Uncard in the Parks Department, one of my very first special projects was to do a surplus property inventory, and that is that I was going to inventory all of the city property that was owned by the city and basically document it. It had never been done. We didn't know where the properties were, what they were worth, the size, or anything. And so Ken Uncard in Parks, that's how we first met, and he helped me document that by searching and looking for the deeds and taking pictures and documenting. And he has been, throughout my tenure in Grand Prairie, quite an assistant. I mean, he has done a lot of things, special things, and he's very talented. Those two people, I would say, probably in my first starting up years, helped me a lot. And then in the middle and the end, there were others that came along. But in the very beginning, those two were really the ones that really brought it.
All right. And proceeding on in your career, what was your next assignment after the capital budget and the inventory for the properties?
Okay. I did a lot of special projects for Bob Blodgett. That's when I was assistant to the manager. I worked a lot on the bond sales and the ratings and how the city gets rated, and put together slideshows and speeches.
You were sort of a PR person, even though...
Yes,
Yes,
that's exactly right. I was a PR person before there ever was one. Although, before me, Mildred Farmer sort of played that role as
Yes,
well.
yes.
I don't know what her job title was, but she also did that. It's kind of like whatever fell through the cracks, I picked up.
Yes.
Whenever there wasn't someone they could directly relate it to, then you kind of got assigned that project. So I did a lot of things. I did most of my projects dealt with coordinating people.
Yes.
And bringing people together from different areas and different expertises. So,
would you like to name drop some of those special human services that you attended? And let's don't forget the logo.
No, I won't forget that. That was when I was assistant city manager. As assistant to the manager, which I was that for about 3 years or 4 years, Bob Blodgett left to go work for the city of Dallas.
Yes.
And Wendell became city manager.
Yes.
And it was basically under Wendell's administration that I really blossomed.
Yes.
Wendell brought me forward, or up, as they say.
Yes.
And that's when I really got involved in so many other things. I was assigned some departments. And that's when Grand Prairie really didn't have any human service type activities.
Yes.
And so there was a couple of groups that wanted to do some things. Maxine Arnold at the YMCA wanted to start a after-school daycare program.
All right.
And several people wanted to start Children First. And at that time, the only person that's left is Barbara Grantham from the original bunch that wanted to start that out. Now Mary Gatlin is the director. And then there was also Brighter Tomorrows. I can remember walking through with Linda Scalf, and we talked about this last weekend, the old Fitness Unlimited building downtown.
Yes.
And it was already dark and boarded up and everything, trying to start the battered women's shelter. That was one of her projects.
Yes.
And so I would like to take credit and say that I was instrumental in getting that approved through the Community Development Block Grant Program.
Yes.
But more importantly, I think I was instrumental in identifying the business aspects of running those operations, those programs.
Yes.
Because the council approved the money, but who was going to be there to administer it?
You needed an administrator.
Right. And so I worked very closely with the people that were involved in there, Maxine and some people from Linda Scalf, and there was a couple of others, and Sherry Goen from Community Development, and we actually put together the scope of services that defined what they were going to do, put the first contracts together. So I became, in that sense, especially, I guess, the human services expert.
Yes.
And since then, that has gotten even more so because I've dealt with the Tyree Park, where we held a lot of public hearings, trying to be sensitive to the people that live there and that are trying to redo the park and make it the way it used to be and accommodate that and go after the grants. The Senior Citizen Center, trying to be, sensitive to their needs, and the ad hoc committee on senior and disabled services. I was the ADA coordinator. Also, one of my proudest things was I became chairman coordinator for the 1990 bond election, which was the largest bond election the city's ever had.
Yes.
And that was really fun because we had a lot of community committees.
Yes.
And we had to do a lot of PR, and you mentioned PR earlier, and that's one of my fortes is, we didn't have a marketing director, and that was one of my original ideas, was to market the city and do it just like corporations do it, and spend money on advertising and focusing in on that. And so one of the first things we did was figure out, well, we don't even have a city logo. So once again, Ken Uncart and I sat down and went through literally hundreds of designs and narrowed it down with the city manager's office and came up with the one that we have now. And I think that's going to be one of my proudest projects, because when I'm long gone, that logo is still going to be here.
Yes.
And as you know, it's everywhere now. Yes. We have T-shirts, we have it on cups, we have it in the news council,
on all the trucks,
briefing room, all the trucks, all the equipment, and everywhere you go. And that was done by myself and Ken Uncart and Parks, so it'll live on. It's a legacy, and I'm very proud of that.
All right, and then you changed city managers from Wendell Halsey and stepped right along to
Right, to Gary Gwynn.
Gary Gwynn.
Who's our city manager now. And Gary gave me a really big assignment, and that was the Parks and Recreation Department.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's the fourth largest department in the city, and even though people don't recognize it as much as they do police and fire and public works, it's still a major department. It has all kinds of human services. It deals directly with the customer. We have the golf course, and it deals with the senior citizens. It deals with youth. It deals with adults. It deals with poor people, rich people.
You helped us stemline the Youth Commission.
Yes, that's right. We have, in fact, there's several commissions. Ethnic and Cultural Commission, the Youth Commission, and you were very instrumental in all that.
Disabled Services.
The Disabled Services Commission, that's right. I mean, I guess I have a big history with people.
Yes.
I'm mostly dealing with people issues. And we've tried to do some things in the Parks Department to sort of turn it around. It had been under the same leadership, John Sellers, for about 18 years. And so when I walked in, of course, I wanted to change things and started some of those changes, and they're still being planned now. But I guess, like I said, I have a lot of history just dealing with people, and that must be my expertise.
Now, one of the most exciting things, how about the history of Autumn Fun Fest?
Oh, okay. That's a real interesting project. Back when Joe Pool Lake was originally, I guess, described, it took longer for it to fill up than they thought. But once it did fill up, then the Chamber of Commerce and the city, and I think there was one other group.
Was the schools?
It may have been the schools. But everybody sort of brainstormed and said, you know, we ought to celebrate the opening of this lake in Grand Prairie, because that's really a really nice feature, and that we should capitalize on that. So several people got together, and they had a committee, and they wanted to have this big celebration for the opening of Joe Pool Lake. Well, in a nutshell, it never could get off the ground. They didn't have the money to do it, basically. They couldn't decide on what kind of a scale it should be, if it should just be like a little grand opening or what it was. And so Wendell assigned the project to me, because I basically have a history of taking a mess and making it right. And I basically just rolled up my sleeves and got organized and put on the first Autumn Fun Fest, which was 4 years ago.
Doesn't seem possible.
No, and I think what happened was people didn't realize the scale that Autumn Fun Fest could be. And I remember always telling the staff and the community people that were helping us, you know, that we are going to think big, but we're going to start small. And so we had a one-day event. We charged $1 per person with TRA, the Trinity River Authority, who run the parks out there. And we had the chamber involved, and we got all kinds of sponsors. Jim Swafford from Nations Bank was our first major sponsor. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have had Major Entertainment, which was Ray Wiley Hubbard at that time. And it was a real success. Everyone loved it. And so the next time the council gave us enough to start the seed money for a 2-day event, and it's just taken off. And now Terry Jackson is chairing the committee. Mo Day had chaired it when I was doing it for 2 years, and it's been turned over, and hopefully in the next couple of years it'll be able to be turned over to a community-based type activity. But now it's 3 days.
That's great.
So, and people are starting to take notice of Autumn Fun Fest.
In the last 4 minutes that we have approximately, where is Belinda headed now?
Okay. Well, after 8.5 years in Grand Prairie, which, you know, I started out on the bottom, I have now been appointed city manager of Soledad, California. And it's very exciting. This is my first city manager's job. I am the first woman city manager in that city.
Oh, my.
And there are no women on the council.
Oh, dear.
But I have a lot of confidence from the council. They have continued to let me know that, and I'm very excited to work with them. They have a lot of the same issues that Grand Prairie has, wanting to maintain their housing stock, provide service to their citizens, redevelop downtown, bring in new commercial and retail
They
establishments.
want everything.
They want everything, just like Grand Prairie does.
Yes, and they want it now.
And they want it now.
And they
And they
don't
think
want
I'm
their-
going to do it.
And they don't want their taxes increased, do
That's
they?
right.
Okay.
That's right.
And what size is the city?
Soledad is about 8,300 people. It is on the quick pace. It's growing very quickly. It's one of the faster growing cities. It is located in the beautiful Salinas Valley between two mountain ranges.
What is your major industry?
Believe it or not, it's agriculture,
Okay.
which is going to be very interesting for me because I have always been in an urban environment.
Yes, yes.
So I have a feeling that my lifestyle and my pace is going to slow a lot.
And they provide you a house and,
Yes.
and big bucks and all the good stuff
Yes, all those things, all the
Yes.
things that go with it.
that you've been wishing for and working toward all these
Right,
years.
that's right. I finally made my dream come true, I guess, after 13 years in
Yes.
the public sector. And I really feel like this community is going to really help me decide, is this really what I want to do, as my career, or do I want to do something else?
And do you have one major wish for that city? What's going to be your real great first focus?
My first focus is going to be to try to figure out a way to get people off Highway 101 to stop in Soledad
Yes.
and have something to do when they get there.
Yes, and that sounds very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And you've met some of the people, and when are you leaving the city of Grand Prairie, Texas? Give us the magic date.
Okay.
And since we're taping this in advance to be shown on during the week of first 2 weeks in June.
Well, I'm leaving on Wednesday, May the 25th, and I'm driving cross-country, and we're going to do some things along the way, like go to Santa Fe and the Grand Canyon, and I start work on June the 1st.
In 1 minute, I'd like for you to thank Grand Prairie for the opportunities they've afforded you, if you'd like to do that.
I would. I have really enjoyed my time in Grand Prairie. It's funny because I never thought I'd be here more than 2 years, and I really have really enjoyed it and have met so many nice, supportive people and people that are very sincere. And I really appreciate the opportunity that I've had for all the growth that I had in my professional career here in Grand Prairie and all the support. I have never been around a council that was as supportive as the ones that I've worked for here in Grand Prairie.
Well, as a volunteer for this program, it's happening in Grand Prairie. I thank you for all of the things that you have caused to happen to this, and for the opportunity to have the council briefings previewed, and you helped me many years in that. For serving on the council as I have done, for you aiding and abetting all of the council members. It's just been a delight to have you in Grand Prairie. I want to
Thank you, Ruthie.
You've been delightful.
Thanks.
And as you know, we're going to name one of the counties of the 254 counties in our special project in your honor.
That's all right.
And we want to thank you again for your service to Grand
Thank
Prairie.
you.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.